Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the chapter, The Origin of Falsehood and Evil, beginning on page 633 with the sentence, "If then evil and falsehood are natural products," and we'll begin with a summary of the previous paragraph.
So in the previous paragraph, Srendra has made a very interesting comment. When one rises to the self, the consciousness of the self, there you find that there is no sin and no virtue. But that is above the mind. But is it true then that there is no sin and no virtue at the lower level when you are not in the self but identified with your body, mind, life? The answer is clearly no. There is evil and there is falsehood and there is also truth. So the dualities exist in the physical world. So then what to do? There is the presence of the psychic being which discerns evil and good, falsehood and truth. So he introduces now the concept of the psychic being. The psychic being is in the lower prakriti. It is there in body, mind, life. Whereas the self is outside body, mind, life. So the two see things in a different way. The self sees everything equally. It does not recognize truth and falsehood in the terms we understand it. It sees it as just something neutral. You say blue and red, okay? Violet, pink. But they are exactly what they are. You don't judge and say this is better than this. So for the self, truth and falsehood are only two poles of the same thing.
Are they then complementary poles?
Yes, they are complementary poles and apparently opposite, but they are not opposite, they are complementary. Whereas here in the physical world, they are opposites. And the psychic being recognizes that they are opposites and differentiates between them. So that's what we are going to read now about the psychic being. 13th summary. What then is the spiritual soul or psychic witness, and what does good and evil mean to it? We may say that sin and evil are useful to the embodied soul to make it aware of the inconscient and ignorant nature of the world. Sin and falsehood and suffering urge man towards their opposites, virtue, truth, bliss. Another use, it may be held, is for the soul to purify itself from sin and evil and pursue good and virtue and turn away from sin and evil. In another view, the Buddhistic view, they prepare the soul for the dissolution of the ignorant ego dominating the body, mind, life. But perhaps the best explanation of the presence of sin and evil is that they are spiritual necessities in the evolution which rises towards God's being, God's unity, God's consciousness. Apart from life and mind, there is a soul personality, a psychic being, which insists clearly on the distinction between the divine and the undivine, though not necessarily in a moral sense. Morality may contradict the spiritual view of things. In a moral condition, you may say this is good, this is bad. Not in the spiritual. Okay. Theft is clearly immoral, not necessarily for the spiritual. Okay. That is the reason why our scriptures, Mahabharata and Ramayana, are full of deeds which the avatars do, which can be interpreted as not the moral right. Okay? There are many cases. So that's what Swami is pointing out. Our moral sense need not agree with the spiritual, with the psychic sense.
But where does the asura come in here?
The asura comes in only at the vital level. Where the dualities are there, they are there. They are not there in the matter, nor are they there above the mind. They are restricted mainly to the vital and the mind. And these also have got several strata. There is a physical vital, there is a vital, and there is a mental vital. All these are planes in the vital plane. Then there is the vital mind, the normal mind, and the pure mind. These are also subject to asuric forces. Above the mind, in the level 2, in the spiritual planes, there is no evil or there is no falsehood. There may be limitation, but not falsehood.
So there is no asura above.
No. You see all these below. You are stationed there and you see these below. Okay. So, the psychic being's main characteristic is delight of life. It makes use of all experiences, positive and negative, and grows by them. In all contacts, it finds a divine use and grows towards consciousness away from inconscience, grows into knowledge away from ignorance, grows into truth away from falsehood. There is the psychic being. Okay. The psychic conception of good and evil will not tally with the mind's valuation of things. The psychic discrimination is automatic, infallible. The divine can make use even of what you think is something immoral. Okay, so while it is true that there is no good and evil below mind, nor above the mind either, this does not mean that man has to accept both good and evil impartially, or even to obey them. The psychic rejects the falsehood and accepts only the truth behind even seeming opposites. That's what he said in the previous para. Now we read the para we have to read today. If then evil and falsehood are natural products of the inconscience, automatic results of the evolution of life and mind, from it, in the processes of the ignorance, we have to see how they arise, on what they depend for their existence, and what is the remedy or escape. In the surface emergence of mental and vital consciousness from the inconscience is to be found the process by which these phenomena come into being. I'll read that sentence again. In the surface emergence of mental and vital consciousness from the inconscience is to be found the process by which these phenomena come into being. Sri often uses an inversion. We would normally have said the falsehood and evil come from the inconscience. But he is saying in the surface emergence of mental and vital consciousness from the inconscience is to be found. Normally he would have said the phenomena of falsehood and is to be found in the surface emergence. But he often reverses the phrases. Here there are two determining factors, and it is to these that are the efficient cause of the simultaneous emergence of falsehood and evil. First, there is an underlying, a still occult consciousness and power of inherent knowledge, and there is also an overlying layer of what might be called indeterminate or else ill-formed stuff of vital and physical consciousness. Through this obscure, difficult medium, the emerging mentality has to force its way and has to impose itself on it by a constructed and no longer an inherent knowledge. because this stuff is still full of nations, heavily burdened and enveloped with the inconscience of matter. Next, the emergence takes place in a separated form of life which has to affirm itself against a principle of inanimate material inertia and a constant pull of that material inertia towards disintegration and a relapse into the original inanimate inconscience. This separated life form has also to affirm itself, supported only by a limited principle of association against an outside world which is, if not hostile to its existence, yet full of dangers and on which it has to impose itself, conquer life room, arrive at expression and propagation if it wishes to survive. The result of an emergence of consciousness in these conditions is the growth of a self-affirming vital and physical individual, a construction of nature of life and matter with a concealed psychic or spiritual true individual behind it, for which nature is creating this outward means of expression. As mentality increases, this vital and material individual takes the more developed form of a constantly self-affirming mental, vital and physical ego. Our surface consciousness and type of existence, our natural being, has to develop its present character under the compulsion of these two initial basic facts of the evolutionary emergence. So, he is very clear, but we have to read it slowly and look at all the words, and we look at it carefully. So, if then evil and falsehood are natural products of the inconscience, automatic results of the evolution of life and mind from it in the processes of the ignorance, we have to see how they arise, on what they depend for their existence, and what is the remedy or escape. So, he has told us already, and he is repeating here, that evil and falsehood come in the evolution from matter to life and from life to mind. You are starting from ignorance, and when you are starting from ignorance, you don't know which way to take. So error becomes possible, and error leads to wrong action and wrong consciousness, and therefore also evil and falsehood. You may go into falsehood because you don't know where you are going. In the involution, you are starting from consciousness, truth, power, ananda. So you can't go wrong. There is a limitation, but there is no. So the same calls it the double ladder. The involutionary ladder coming down and the evolutionary ladder going up. And in the evolutionary ladder also, it's only, there is no falsehood in matter, no falsehood, no truth. But when life comes in, and he's using a very interesting word, separated life, we'll read that. In other words, multiplicity starts. And if multiplicity starts, the possibility of enemy is there. If there's only oneness, there's no enemy. But if multiplicity comes in, there can be an association, and yet there can also be a struggle. So the problem starts there. The division creates the possibility of falsehood and wrong action. We have to see how they arise, or what is the remedy and how to escape. In the surface emergence of mental and vital consciousness from the inconscience is to be found the process by which these phenomena come into being. So he is saying that evil and falsehood start coming into the picture when life and mind are evolving. Okay, so here there are two determining factors. So we'll see what those two determining factors are. And it is these that are the efficient cause of the simultaneous emergence of falsehood and evil. Now he is using a very interesting word, efficient cause. There is very often a remote cause and an efficient cause. the efficient cause is immediately what's happening. But something very far away, the possibility of something happening is a remote cause. Okay? So it's very interesting. He has explained this elsewhere. Okay? The French Revolution, there are two causes, a remote cause and an efficient cause. The efficient cause was the monarchy in France and their neglect of the poor. Okay? But the remote cause was the American Revolution, the turning against the British. There was a revolt. So that revolt is the remote cause and this is the efficient cause. So here also he is talking of efficient cause. Okay, so he is saying here there are two determining factors, and it is these that are the efficient cause of the simultaneous. So efficient cause, immediate cause. Okay, so and it is these that are the efficient cause of simultaneous emergence of falsehood and evil. First, he has spoken of two determining factors. The first one, there is an underlying, a still occult consciousness and power of inherent knowledge. Okay, so in matter, there has been an involution, and that involution is the cause of occult. Occult means it is hidden. So in matter, there is a consciousness which is hidden, and there is also a power of inherent knowledge. So that also is there. And there is also an overlying layer of what might be called indeterminate or else ill-formed stuff of vital and physical consciousness. So, indeterminate, it's not yet fully taken form. That's what it means by indeterminate. Or else ill-formed stuff of vital and physical consciousness. So what he is saying is that in matter there is inherent the power of real knowledge, but on top, on the surface, there is a ill-formed. He is using the word ill-formed, or he is using the word occult, hidden consciousness power. That is there.
I'd like to ask about that. A still occult. What does that? A still occult.
Still means silent.
Oh, silent here.
Not in this sense of non-acting.
Okay.
Which is not acting.
Got it.
In other words, it is inherent.
Yeah.
It is. It's a possibility, but it's not an actuality. That's what he means by still. Okay, a still occult consciousness. Okay, so and power of inherent knowledge, and there is also an overlying layer of what might be called indeterminate or else ill-formed stuff of vital and physical consciousness. So, it's like mud. Mud has got the possibility of creating a pot. That's the inherent power it has. But if the pot is not yet fully made, it is the overlying layer of what might be called indeterminate. Someone is trying to give it a shape. It's not yet a pot, but the beginning of a pot is there. So that's what it means by this. Okay. So there is the possibility of knowledge, but there is also the indeterminate stuff just above. But in life, it starts taking a form. We'll read the next sentence. And there is also an overlying layer of what might be called indeterminate. Indeterminate means without form, or else ill-formed stuff of vital and physical consciousness. Through this obscure, difficult medium, the emerging mentality has to force its way and has to impose itself by a constructed and no longer an inherent knowledge. Now, what's the difference between inherent knowledge and constructed knowledge? Inherent knowledge is real knowledge but not yet manifested. But constructed knowledge is construction of the mind. The mind is seeking truth, And when it can't understand, it makes a theory. And that's a construction. So all our mental thoughts are constructions of the mind. They take a form. But because they take a form, they can also be destroyed. So all our thoughts at the mental level are only constructions, and they can be destroyed. That is exactly what happens in science. You see certain phenomena and you have a theory. It could be like this. That's a construction. But some other data comes up 10 to 20 years later, and you say, oh, that theory was a little defective. This is a better theory. So you replace that with a new construction. Destroy the old construction and begin. Whenever there is a construction, it can be broken down. All nature's creations from matter, life, mind are only constructions. All life forms are destructible. So they are constructions. The mind also same thing. All the thoughts are constructions. But when you go to the self, it's not a construction anymore. The mind is silent, but it sees the truth. There is no construction there. Okay, that's what he's saying. Okay, so because the stuff is still full of nations, heavily burdened and enveloped with the inconscience of matter. So it's trying to come out, but the mind is constructing and trying to understand things. Okay, so next, the emergence takes place in a separated form of life. Now that's interesting. When there is life, it's a general principle in the universal life plane. But when it becomes in the evolutionary growth upwards, it takes separated forms. Amoeba, insects, slightly, even insects, there are 100,000 types of it, separated. And when separation takes place, as we said, the possibility of a clash and a disharmony can come in. And when there is disharmony, there is going to be wrong action. Instead of harmony, there will be a clash. So that's why separate is so important, the word. Okay? Separated form of life, which has to affirm itself. He said that explaining. It has to affirm itself against the principle of inanimate material inertia and a constant pull of that material inertia towards disintegration and a relapse into the original inanimate inconscience. Okay. Now, this what he is saying is the power of matter to pull down, that is tamas. And if tamas were the only thing to exist, it would not allow any growth. And if there is no growth, there is going to be disintegration. Take even a stone, okay? Let alone living things. Living things, if there is no growth, they will die. But even a stone, okay, which is not living, but it will disintegrate in due course by the powers of nature. Rain, wind, storm, water will destroy it. So tamas is influencing the life element and pulling it down. So life has to assert itself and fight against the tamasic principle. That's what he's saying.
Tamas is pulling it down.
Tamas is the one that says no change. I don't want action. I want stability. That is tamas. So it pulls you, if you are trying to do something, it obstructs you and says, no, I don't want action. I want non-action. And non-action will end in disintegration. You can see that very clearly in life and even in non-life. As I said, even a stone, in due course it will disintegrate. So, next, I'm reading that again. Next, the emergence takes place in a separated form of life which has to affirm itself against a principle of inanimate material inertia and a constant pull of that material inertia towards disintegration and a relapse into the original inanimate, inconscious. This separated life form, same way again repeating, separated life form has also to affirm itself. Now the separated life forms exist only in the physical world. The non-separated life is in the involutionary stage. The one that comes down. There is life principle is there, but there is no separation, no forms. Formless life element. Okay, so this separated life form has also to affirm itself, supported only by a limited principle of association. So, in life, when there is separation, two things can happen. Either there can be friendship or there can be enmity between two elements. So, association is possible, that's attraction towards each other, but there is also a question of separation. So, that's what he's pointing out. Okay? So, by limited principle of association against an outside world which is, if not hostile to its existence, yet full of dangers and on which it has to impose itself, conquer life room, arrive at expression and propagation if it wishes to survive.
The question I have, if not hostile to its existence, if not hostile.
If not hostile to its existence, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay? By limited principle of association against an outside world which is, if not hostile to its existence, yet full of dangers. So, what Swami is saying that whether there is open hostility or not, there are always dangers. That's what he is saying. Okay? The two phrases go together. If not hostile to its existence, at least full of dangers.
Yes.
That's what he means. Yet full of dangers. If you put the word at least, it becomes clear.
Yeah. But if it is hostile, how is it hostile?
How is it?
How is it hostile?
Oh, no. If we are two, okay, that's what it is. He uses the word separate. Separate means that multiplicity.
Right.
If there is multiplicity, there is a possibility of hostility, isn't it? Or association.
Okay.
If I become friendly with somebody, there is no problem. But there may be another two which are also associating and fighting with you. That's happening in the world all the time. Okay. So, that is what he means, that even if it is not hostile, it's full of danger because there is separation. If there is no separation, if there is only one, there is perfect harmony. There is no enmity. But with this, that's why the word separate is so important. Okay. The multiplicity that comes in. Yet full of dangers on which it has to impose itself, conquer life room, arrive at expression and propagation if it wishes to survive. These words that Swami is using, these phrases, is exactly what is Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Survival of the fittest. You have to fight. Okay. Even in the essays he points that out. That the moment you are in life here, you have to struggle. And that is the reason why he says in another article in Heraclitus, Heraclitus says, war is the father of all things. It's only by war that you can exist and grow. If you don't war, then you will have no. It's very interesting. In the essay on the Gita, he says that the same idea is being said here also. Okay, so if you have to fight, the fight can be for a principle without being disturbed, which is what the yogi has to do. But it can be full of anger and jealousy and enmity and violence. Then it becomes wrong. So the moment there is separation of life forms, evil and falsehood can come in. That's what he's explaining. Okay, yeah. The result of an emergence of consciousness in these conditions is the growth of a self-affirming, vital and physical individual again, separation, construction of nature of life and matter with a concealed psychic or spiritual true individual behind it, for which nature is creating this outward means of expression. We'll read that sentence again. The result of an emergence of consciousness in these conditions. Which conditions? Multiplicity, where there can be association, but there can also be a danger. A construction of nature, of life and matter, with a concealed psychic or spiritual true individual behind it. Okay. He has told us that there is potential knowledge and potential. So that's the truth part. So there is a psychic, and there is also the formation of nature. The psychic is there behind. Okay. And why is nature is creating life and matter? To give the possibility of experience in the world to the psychic. Every time you are born, nature is providing a life and a body and a mind to the soul. Come, occupy this house and have your experience in the world. So that's what he's saying, as a creating this outward means of expression. Okay, so it is allowing, nature is allowing you to for experience. As mentality increases, this vital and material individual takes a more developed form of a constantly self-affirming mental, vital and physical ego. So, the moment the mentality develops, the ego starts also becoming obvious. Okay. Constantly self-affirming mental, vital and physical ego. Note interestingly, even the physical ego. Okay. Mental ego is there, vital ego is there, there is even a physical ego. The separation. In matter, there are atoms, and each atom is separate. That's a physical ego. Okay, so it's interesting. Remember that ego is not sense of superiority, sense of I am superior to others. That's not it. That's a result. Okay? This ego really is nothing but making you feel separate from everybody else. Again, the question of multiplicity comes in. That, and the result of ego is sense of superiority and other things, arrogance and all this. They are only results of ego. They are not ego. Okay? Our surface consciousness and type of existence, our natural being, body, mind, life, has developed its present character under the compulsion of these two initial and basic facts of the evolutionary emergence. So, one is the life coming up, and there is also a psychic being behind. These are the two forms. Okay? So, there is a possibility of true consciousness and knowledge, but there is also a growth of the multiplicity. So, these are the two which come. So, we will do one thing, we will read the summary, so it becomes clear, it will be condensed form. Okay? Falsehood and evil are the natural results of the inconscience of matter. Life sprouts out, and then from it mind appears. Both are heavily burdened at the very origin itself with the ignorance and dense inconscience, with the ignorance of dense inconscience. It is from this evolutionary process of life and mind, springing out of inconscience, that is to be found the birth of falsehood and evil. Let us see the two causes of this process. In the inconscience, there is underlying a hidden consciousness and knowledge, and over it there is an undifferentiated mass of vital and physical consciousness. Through this dense and dark stuff, the mental consciousness has to emerge and force its way upwards and impose itself aggressively on a hostile environment if it wants to survive at all. Hostile because in the many there are contrary forces, each struggling to survive against the other forces opposed to it. Okay. Multiplicity automatically implies the possibility of a clash. Okay. Next, this consciousness that is emerging out of the dense material consciousness takes the form of individual life forms, separation. Each separate life form struggles in a dangerous and inimical environment to assert itself. In this work, it is supported by the principle of association and aggregation coming together. Helpful. All life proceeds by association of individual forms into molecules, and these again forming basic life forms. In the emergence of life, nature first constructs the physical vital individual, which asserts itself in this dangerous and hostile medium. Nature has achieved at first a physical vital entity with a deeper hidden psychical spiritual supporting the outer personality. Nature is building the physical vital individual for the habitation of the spiritual entity within. When mind emerges later, this physical vital individual develops further and becomes the mental individual with ego supported by an outer life body. Nature has now created the mental man with ego, but with a psychic entity within, supporting it from within, and an outer physical vital body supporting it externally and allowing it a residence, a housing in the physical world. That's what he is saying. I read the next paragraph. In its first appearance, consciousness has the semblance of a miracle, a power alien to matter that manifests unaccountably in a world of inconscient nature and grows slowly and with difficulty. Knowledge is acquired, created out of nothing, as it were, learned maybe, increased, accumulated by a ephemeral ignorant creature in whom at birth it is entirely absent or present only not as knowledge but in the form of an inherited capacity proper to the stage of development of this slowly learning ignorance. It might be conjectured that consciousness is only the original inconscience mechanically recording the facts of existence on the brain cells with a reflex or response in the cells automatically reading the record and dictating their answer. The record, reflex, response together constitute what appears to be consciousness. But this is evidently not the whole truth, for it might account for observation and mechanical action, although it is not clear how an inconscious record and response can turn into a conscious observation, a conscious sense of things, and a sense of, what is that word? Self. Okay. But does not credibly account for ideation, imagination, speculation, the free play of intellect which is observed material. The evolution of consciousness and knowledge cannot be accounted for unless there is already a concealed consciousness in things with its inherent and native powers emerging little by little. Further, the facts of animal life and the operations of the emergent mind in life impose on us the conclusion that there is in this concealed consciousness an underlying knowledge or power of knowledge which, by the necessity of the life contacts with the environment, comes to the surface. Now, this is quite a interesting para. First of all, Sadhu is saying, how is consciousness interpreted by science? Okay, that's what he is saying. The first part, that's what he is saying. Then he says, it's not only mechanical, there is a real consciousness inside. Whereas science is interpreting consciousness as a reaction to the environment. In the stone, apparently there is no reaction to the environment. If I throw water on it or if I give it a kick, it doesn't react. Science will say no consciousness, which is not true. From the spiritual point of view, there is, and there is also a reaction which you are unable to see. But even the stone, when kicked, will react. You know very well that if a plant, even if you pluck one leaf, it will react, but you don't see it. The same phenomena is taking place in the stone also. So, science is saying no consciousness. But the moment there is a reaction to the environment, science will say this is consciousness. So, in other words, what Swami is saying, now we'll read the first, it will become clear, that when there is a action, a force coming from outside, and there is a reaction from the cells from inside, that is consciousness. Science will say. Swami is saying that's not true. Okay, so now see the words, you will see that. In its first appearance, consciousness has a semblance, similarity, of a miracle, a power alien to matter that manifests unaccountably in a world of inconscient nature. Okay? It seems semblance, it looks as though there is no consciousness in matter, alien to matter, okay? And grows slowly and with difficulty. Knowledge is acquired, created out of nothing, as it were, learnt, increased, accumulated by an ephemeral, ignorant creature in whom at birth it's entirely absent and present only, not as knowledge, but in the form of an inherited capacity proper to the stage of development of a slowly learning ignorance. So, when an amoeba, the unicellular creature first comes, life is there, okay? It interacts with other unicellular creatures and learns how to protect itself. So, it's a learned process. So, if they use the words, learnt, increased, accumulated by an ephemeral, ignorant creature. Okay? So, but there is also a gradation. What the unicellular creature is learning is inferior to what a cricket or an insect will learn, or an animal will learn even better. There is a proportionate to the, he is saying, but in the form of an inherent capacity proper to the stage of development of the slowly learning existence. There are grades of learning. Okay, so that's what he's saying. So I'll read the summary only.
Okay.
And next time we will go into detail. Very interesting what he's saying.
Yes.
Okay, if we look carefully, that's why. So what he's saying here in this para. When first life emerges from matter, it is nothing short of a sheer miracle. How does dead matter become alive? It's a miracle. Okay. The life form grows, becomes gradually more complex, learns, acquires knowledge. Where does the knowledge and consciousness come from? From matter? But it is dead, a blank of inconscience. This power of learning, knowing, could be an inherited power from below in matter. It seems to be an ignorance which has the power to learn and know. Okay? Or it might be held that what we call consciousness is nothing but the inconscience mechanically recording sense data and as mechanically dictating a response. This is the idea of science. Science says that consciousness is nothing but an impact and a reaction to the impact. Okay? That's how they did. But it's not that. Okay? So, but the scientific view is not satisfactory because many things are not explained. For instance, how can a mechanical record suddenly turn into a conscious response and the sense of an egoistic itself? I am doing the act. Okay? So, what Swami is saying, Science is, that's not enough, because it's not a mere reaction. It's a conscious reaction. How is the consciousness coming in? There's a motive in the reaction. Okay? So, suppose what science is saying is, if I give you a slap, there will be a counter action. But that is producing psychological, some emotions also. So how does the emotion come in? That's what science is saying. So it's not satisfactory. The scientific theory is not satisfactory. There was something more than that. Okay, so in any case, the mechanical theory cannot explain ideation, imagination, free play of intellect. If you give a slap, mechanical action is there, all right, I agree. But how is imagination coming in? How is motive coming in? How is the goal, idea of a goal coming in? So it's not just a action and reaction, it's not that. It's something much more than that. A careful observation of animal life, their instincts, imposes on us the necessity of an involved underlying knowledge and consciousness in the inconscience itself. Okay? It is this involved consciousness that springs out of the inconscience of matter. He is trying to explain to us that there is an involution and consciousness is already there. So it's not that much of a miracle. It's already there, it's coming out. In the beginning it looks like a miracle, but it's not really a miracle. That's what he's saying.
Thank you, Ranga.
We stop here today.
Namaste all. We'll see you again on Monday for the continuation, and we are on page 634. We will complete that paragraph.